Amma ba'd. To begin, just over our schedule quickly, we are now on our final week of the study of this name of Allah, Dhul-Jalali Wal Ikraam. We will be wrapping up the study and we'll be going over a few of the things and the most important of all lessons to learn from all of the names and the attributes of Allah. And inshallah, next week we will be having our breakfast. So note down the date, inshallah, the 3rd of February, we'll be having our next breakfast, inshallah. All of us are urged to attend them. Afshu salam wa at'imu ta'am. Spread the peace, feed one another, get to know one another, so that we can build our community and the ummah. May Allah grant us all mawadda for one another, love and compassion with one another. And so today we'll go over some of the paired names that Allah has paired together, or Rasulullah ﷺ also has paired together with the name of Allah, Al-Kareem, or with the attribute of Karam. We'll also go over calling upon Allah with His names and His attributes. We did go over it last week, but there are a few more things to go over. And then after that, we'll bring the entire study together, which is all under one ayah. And there's also a correction that we need to make from last week. And for those who pointed this out, may Allah bless you. We thank you for it. And may Allah increase you also. May Allah grant us all acceptance. May Allah grant us all Jannatul Firdaus. And so we were discussing last week of the ahadith of tawassul, is that when we ask Allah, we have to ask Allah with full yaqeen, with full certainty. So that we shouldn't be saying, Ya Allah, if you wish, give me this, or if you wish, give me that. And so of the points that we made within that context, just to make things clear, is that we don't really have to say, oh Allah, if you know that this is good for me, or if this is good for me, then give it to me. Because we should be making dua with full conviction. However, does that mean then that in our general du'as, we do have full conviction that Allah is Ar-Rahman, and that whatever we ask Allah for, He is Ar-Rahman, He's going to give us what's best for us. And He's also Al-Hakim, He's the most wise, He knows what's best for us. And so when we ask Allah, then we know for 100% with full yaqeen that He's going to give us what's best for us, even if we may not be able to see it at the time. However, can we then say in our du'as, oh Allah, if this is better for me, or if another thing is better for me, then give it to me? Yes, you can. And we'll find also in the sunnah, in du'a al-istikhara, that's exactly what we say. Allahumma in kunta ta'lamu anna hadha al-amra khayran li fi dini wa ma'ashi wa aqibati amri. That, oh Allah, if this matter, and you're thinking of a certain matter, whether it be to get married to a certain person, or to move to a different house, or to leave your job and get another job, or any of the big decisions that you have to make. If in kunta ta'lamu, if in your knowledge you know that this is better for me, fi dini, for my deen, and for my dunya, and for my living and my ending, then make it easy for me, ordain it for me. And likewise also, oh Allah, if you know that this is evil or bad for me, then turn me away from it and turn it away from me. So yes, we can make dua like that. And it shows the height of your submission, that Ya Allah, grant me what you know is best for me. I'll be happy with whatever you give me. For as long as you are pleased with me, I don't care. That is how the believer will make dua. That as whatever is most pleasing to you, O Allah, grant me that. Because that's our purpose. Our purpose is to please Allah. Nothing more, nothing less. May Allah grant us all His pleasure and make us also pleased with Him. And that's another very important dua we should go over. Is that we should be asking Allah also, and whilst it may not sound linguistically correct at first, that Ya Allah, make me pleased with you, because we are the slave and He is the Rabb, it should be the other way around. But Allah is As-Samad, He is eternal and He never changes. If He is pleased with you, that wouldn't change. Your actions would change that. So when you say, oh Allah, cause my heart to always be pleased with you, you're actually asking Allah to protect you from His displeasure, or to protect you from going down the route of sin, because our heart is always changing. Ya muqallib al-qulub, Allah is the changer of hearts. Thabbit qalbi ala dinik, make our hearts firm upon your deen. May Allah grant us all a good understanding. And so of the paired names that we find, and the first is of course Dhul Jalali Wal Ikraam. And you are thinking, when you make dua with this name, you say Ya Dhul Jalali Wal Ikraam, you're thinking of both the Jalala of Allah, the majesty of Allah, and also His Karam, His generosity, His honor. And you also have Akramul Akrameen. You can say Ya Akramul Akrameen. This is similar to Arhamur Rahimin. Arhamur Rahimin being the most merciful of those who show mercy. Akramul Akrameen would be the most generous or the most honorable of those who are generous and honorable. Likewise, we'll find in the Qur'an that Allah, He's paired His name Al-Kareem with Al-Ghani. That فَإِنَّ رَبِّي غَنِيٌّ كَرِيمٌ. That our Lord is Al-Ghani, the one who is free of all need, the all-rich, independent, Al-Kareem, and the most generous. And so when you really want something and you raise your hands and you fulfill the adab of dua, then you will say, Ya Ghaniyun Kareem. And you're submitting wholeheartedly to the fact that you are in dire, desperate need of Allah. And He's Al-Ghani, and He's the only one that can give you, and He is the most generous. That He is Ghani and you are Faqir. He is the rich and you are the poor. He is Qawi, He is the strong, and you are the Da'if, the weak. When we implement this in our dua and we humble ourselves, acknowledging that we have no power at all and all power is with Allah, that is how we submit to Allah. That is what submitting to Allah is in our dua. And that's one of the ways when we have humbled ourselves to Allah in our dua, we will find that the response of Allah will be coming to us. May Allah grant us all a good understanding. We can also say, Ya Jawadul Kareem, or Jawadun Kareem. Al-Jawad is another name of Allah. The most generous usually is also translated as. And Jawad is one that is very, very generous when they give. So you can say, Ya Jawadun Kareem. You want something from Allah. You are calling upon Him and praising Him for His generosity towards you. Likewise, you can even say, Ra'ufun Kareem. One of Allah's names is Ar-Ra'uf, the one who is the most compassionate, and He has pity towards His slaves. And you and I, we realize that we are also in dire need of Allah having pity upon us, for Allah showing Ra'fa upon us. Now, Ra'fa is an extreme form of Rahmah. So you have Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim, the entirely merciful, the most merciful. And then you have Ar-Ra'uf. Ar-Ra'uf is a form of Rahmah that is very extreme. So much so that without you even knowing, when Allah has mercy upon you, He's removing difficulties from your path that you would never have known of. You will never know of. Perhaps if Allah tells you in the akhirah, may Allah grant us all that honor, then you will find that's Ra'fa. That Allah, He does things for you without knowing. You're just sleeping away. You're just walking, going to work, going about your daily routine. Yet Allah, He's tending to you even at those moments when we are being heedless. He's removing difficulties from your path. He's protecting you. He's doing so many things for us. That's Ra'fa, an extreme form of compassion, where He has pity towards His slaves. Maybe you're in a difficult situation and you think, Ya Ra'ufun Kareem. Oh, most compassionate, most generous. Allahu Akbar. And you're calling upon Allah to look towards you with the eye of pity so that He removes your difficulties. And then how deeply would you be asking Allah at that moment from the bottom of your heart? Again, may Allah grant us all a good understanding. So these are paired names of Allah, and it's very important to go through the Qur'an and ahadith to see how the names of Allah has been paired, because there's a lot of hikmah in them, and we should be using them in our du'as. Likewise, Allah, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, He mentioned in a hadith, where He says, Inna Allaha hayyiyun kareemun. Yastahyi. And subhanAllah, this hadith is amazing. Yastahyi إذا رفع الرجل إليه يديه أن يردهما صفرا خائبتين. That Inna Allah hayyiyun kareem. Again, these are attributes of Allah. He is hayyi. Al-hayyi is the one who has haya. He has a sense of modesty that comes from His karam, His honor. That He is so generous that when His slave, إِذَا رَفَعَ الرَّجُلُ إِلَيْهِ يَدَيْهِ, when a man raises his hands to Allah, then Allah, He feels shy to allow those hands to drop empty-handed, because He is so generous. Every single time you raise your hands to Allah, Allah is putting some goodness in those hands. He would not allow any hand to drop empty-handed. That is the honor, that is the generosity of your Lord. Yes, do not get it confused between modesty and takabbur. Allah is al-mutakabbir, He is the proud. Rightfully, takabbur is His. He is proud and supreme. Yet when it comes to His believing slaves and His generosity, it's like how sometimes a person, they may come and ask us, and then we may have some money and we feel too shy to say, no, I'm not going to give you, so we give them anyways. It's something similar to that. This honorable sense of haya. May Allah grant us all a good understanding. We can even say this, Oh Allah, You are hayyiyun kareem. Ya hayyiyun kareem. You are the one who never allows your slaves to go empty-handed. And grant me this and grant me that. This is how we call upon Allah using His attributes. May Allah grant us all a good understanding. And likewise in another narration, quite similar, is Rasulullah ﷺ said, Inna Allah Rahimun Hayyiyun Kareem. So now these are three names you're calling. Ya Rahimun Hayyiyun Kareem. O most merciful, the one who has an honorable sense of haya, and the most generous. Again, it's mentioned in this hadith that he would be shy for his servant to raise his hands to him and then to not place any goodness in either of them. And so again, these are just, a few lessons on how to use the attributes, the names and the attributes of Allah. Because like we mentioned, there are many more attributes than there are names. So we have the names of Allah and we have the attributes of Allah. We can use both. And like how we were going over last week, in part of the hadith we were going over, you can say, bijalalik, with your majesty, I ask you. You can even say, bi'izzatik. We find that in the sunnah, Allahumma inni a'udhu bi'izzatika la ilaha illa anta an tudillani. Oh Allah, I ask you by your izzah that la ilaha illa anta, there is none worthy of worship except you, an tudillani, lest you send me astray. You're asking Allah to protect you from His guidance. Likewise, you can say birahmatik or bijalalik or bikaramik. Oh Allah, I ask you by your karam, with your generosity, that you grant me such and such. Again, using the attributes in your du'as. May Allah grant us solely good understanding and the ability to implement this in our du'a to Him. However, we also have to be cautious. See, we cannot use anything other than the names and the attributes of Allah in our dua unless it's proven in the sunnah. And this is where major deviation and corruption in aqeedah comes into play, and where many Muslims may fall into shirk. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, many from this ummah also, they will conduct shirk, or they will commit to shirk. May Allah protect us. Some claim that we can call upon Allah as tawassul through certain slaves, through His honored slaves, the saints, which is why then, using that, they go to the graves. And then they try to do shafa'ah and tawassul through those in the graves in order to get a response from Allah. That is something that we are not allowed to do. That is something that is strictly against the very basic tenet of Tawheed, that you call upon Allah alone. May Allah grant us all good understanding. Likewise, there are those who say that we will do istighatha, which is istighatha is quite similar to tawassul, is that you will call upon Allah, seek relief from Allah through Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That you will go and you make dua, you'll say, Ya Rasulullah, or etc., etc. This is something we are not allowed to do again, because it is not one of the names or the attributes of Allah Himself. You are only allowed to use the names and the attributes of Allah in your dua, nothing else. What we do find in the sunnah, and this is a dua that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught to Aisha radiallahu anha, is that you can say, Allahumma Rabba Muhammadin sallallahu alayhi wasallam. O Allah, the Lord of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Ighfir li dhanbi wa adhib ghayda qalbi wa a'idhni min mudillatil fitan. That's the dua. That forgive me my sins, remove all anger from my heart. This is actually the dua that when you're feeling angry, we are supposed to say this. Wa a'idhni min mudillatil fitan. And protect me from fitan that sends me astray. And so we find that a means of tawassul, we can say, Allahumma Rabba Muhammadin sallallahu alayhi wasallam. But again, you're using the attribute of Allah that He is the Lord of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. You're not going straight through Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam or any of the other anbiya or anything as such. Again, may Allah protect us all from that. So yes, there is no such thing as istighatha and tawassul through Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam or any of the other anbiya or the awliya of Allah. May Allah protect us all from shirk. Moving on to our next topic, and this is our main topic for today, is where the entire study that we've conducted, and we have been studying Ismul A'zam, the greatest name of Allah that's mentioned in the ahadith, for the past 1.5 years. Now I see many of the faces, we've been here for the past 1.5 years. None of us can come and say anymore that we are amateurs when it comes to the names of Allah. You are all veterans now. You should all have a good, close understanding and intimacy with all of these names that we have studied. I'm pretty sure we are all calling upon Allah using these names on a daily basis. And we feel connected to Allah with these names of His. And it all goes back to one ayah. The entire study of Asma wa Sifat. And we'll be continuing with the study after. We still have many more names to cover. But it won't be as long as what we have studying so far, such as Al-Hayyul Qayyum, Ar-Rahmanir Rahim, and Dhul-Jalali Wal Ikraam. These by far were the most comprehensive and largest of names that we had to go into a lot of detail over. There are still some names that there's much to speak of, such as Al-Fattah, Al-Razzaq, Al-Ghafoor, for example. So we will be spending quite some time on those, but it will not be as long as all of the lectures that we have been doing so far. And so every single name you will ponder over, or you will ever learn of Allah, it all goes back to implementation. Because with knowledge comes action. And so if you have this understanding of the names of Allah, it comes down to action. We've also been over how to live by the names of Allah, how to implement it into action, but it's still not enough. Because the one thing that connects intentions and your knowledge into action itself is something called at-tawfiq. That which connects your knowledge to action, and that comes only from Allah. At-tawfiq min Allah. Tawfiq only comes from Allah, and that's hidayah, guidance. When you say ihdina as-sirat al-mustaqim, guide us onto the straight path. The most important dua you and I will ever make. The most important dua you and I will ever make is ihdina as-sirat al-mustaqim. And likewise, when you're thinking about the names and the attributes of Allah, this is something that's supposed to transform our entire lives. It transforms our du'as and it transforms our salah. Because in order for khushu' to enter the hearts, you have to know who Allah is. And so we are thinking of the names and the attributes of Allah in your salah. That's what it comes down to. And specifically the main ayah, and we've been over it briefly in the past, we'll go in further detail, is إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. The second half of Surah Fatiha. And there's many virtues to Surah Fatiha itself. Ulama in the past, they have written entire thick books of study just of Surah Fatiha, the fada'il and the different reflections that they've had just from Surah Fatiha itself. And so when we recite Surah Fatiha, we know of the response that Allah, He responds to us. When we say Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, then Allah, He responds saying Hamidani Abdi. Likewise, when you say Ar-Rahmanir Rahim, Allah, He responds saying, Athna alayya abdi. And then when you say Maliki Yawmiddin, He continues, He responds and says, Majjadani abdi. And Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. And so He says that this is for my slave and he will have what he's asked for. And so the first part of Surah Fatiha, which is the first 3 ayat, that's for Allah. And then the rest is for you. And so we learn one of the ways to implement this in your Fatiha whilst you're actually in Salah is to think about the response of Allah before you even recite the ayah. So before you recite Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, think about the response of Allah. That you know that Allah is going to respond to you saying, Hamidani Abdi, my slave has praised me. So that when you do say Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, you will really be feeling that, yes, I am praising my Lord. And so that element of mushahada, of being in the presence, you're not thinking of anything else, you're only thinking about the fact that you're praising Allah. It's coming from the bottom of your heart at that point, because you've already thought that yes, Allah is going to respond to you, and it helps you remember why you're reciting that ayah. Likewise, before you recite Ar-Rahmanir Rahim, you need to know and be thinking about the response of Allah. That Allah says, Athna alayya abdi. My slave has extolled me. Thana is to repeatedly praise. And there's 2 things we learn from this. Number 1 is that when you use the names of Allah, it is a form of praise. When you say Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, just saying that in itself is a form of praise. When you're making your dua, you are calling upon Allah, using His attributes, because you want from Allah, but also you are praising Him at the same time with those attributes. So when you say Ya Dhul Jalali Wal Ikraam before you ask Him something, not only are you calling upon Him using His attributes, but you are also praising Him at the same time. So 2 birds with 1 stone. Allahu Akbar. You're praising Allah and you're asking Him through His attributes at the same time. So you're thinking about the response of Allah. So when you say Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, you already know you're extolling your Lord. So you know that you are repeatedly praising Him. So you are able to implement in your salah that sense that yes, you are repeatedly praising Him. So when you say Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, that sense of praise is really in your heart. Likewise, before you say Maliki Yawmiddin, you're already thinking, Majjadani Abdi. Allah is going to say, my slave has glorified me. And in another narration is mentioned, Fawwada ilayya amri. That my slave has submitted all of his affairs to me. That when you realize that you're returning to Allah anyway. So every single thing that you go through in your life is all going back to Allah. With you. Your actions, everything is going back to Allah. So Maliki Yawmiddin, the king or the master or the owner of Yawmuddin, the day of judgment. So whilst you're saying that you've already glorified Allah and you've humbled yourself, that He's in complete control of your judgment, He's in complete control of your affairs, what's going to be happening to you in the akhirah. So you really say it from the bottom of your heart. Then you say, Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in. And this is when you want to start thinking about the names of Allah. The names of Allah that you've studied and the pairs that you'll find. So, for example, let's take the names that we have studied, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. And we recall the understanding that we have of these names, that Ar-Rahman is He who is entirely merciful. And Ar-Rahim is the one who is continuously merciful, in the fa'il form, as we recall. And so when you're saying, Iyaka na'bud, you're thinking, you alone we worship, Ya Rahman. Just in your mind you're thinking, Ya Rahman, you are the most merciful. Nobody can have mercy upon me like how you do. Wa iyyaka nasta'in. And you alone we ask for help. Because all help is in the rahmah of Allah itself. He's Ar-Rahim, the one who bestows His rahmah upon His slave. So you already, before you recited the ayah, you already thought of the fact that Allah is going to give you what you want. Whatever you ask Allah for, He's going to give you. And now you're thinking of the names of Allah as you are saying, Iyaka na'bud. And so that sense of Tawheed and complete submission is again in your heart. And when you say, Wa iyyaka nasta'in, when you know that Allah is Ar-Rahim, and you say, Oh Allah, I'm asking you for your help, it really comes from the bottom of your heart then, because you know who Ar-Rahim is. And you need His rahmah. And without His rahmah, you know that you're not going to Jannah. Because Rasulullah ﷺ said, even he can't go to Jannah unless Allah has rahmah upon him. And so we'll also learn, the names of Allah, it affects our feelings. And it can have an effect in our challenges in life. And so that we need to be using the appropriate names in these situations, in our qiyam, whilst reciting Surah Fatiha, and also in our dua. And likewise also with the names of Allah, you're thinking about them when you go into ruku'. So when you go into ruku' and you're saying Subhana Rabbiyal Azim, this is one of the names of Allah, the most great or the most magnificent or the most tremendous. But likewise you're also thinking about dhatihi wa af'alihi. If you can learn this key, then from today onwards your salah will change. Dhatihi wa af'alihi. That, Allah's essence, and af'al, His actions, how He treats His slaves. How Allah is in His essence, in His self, and how Allah treats His slaves. So when you say Subhana Rabbiyal Azim, you're thinking of His essence, that Allah Himself is the most great. So that you will fear Him alone, you will turn to Him alone, and you will seek His pleasure alone. And you're still saying Subhana Rabbiyal Azim, because you have to say it 3 times. You're also thinking of His actions towards you. That the actions of Allah are the greatest. Nobody can compare to the actions of Allah towards you. That if He is Ar-Rahim, then nobody can have rahmah upon you like Allah. So even in your ruku' when you're saying that, now it's from the heart, with ikhlas and with ihsan. In a state of khushu, it's coming from the bottom of your heart. Likewise, you're thinking of His favors upon you. Look at how azim His favors are upon you. Look at how azim Allah treats you, it's amazing. Likewise in your sujood. Again, the key, dhatihi wa af'alihi. His dhat and His af'al. That Allah is the most high, al-a'la, in His essence. And you are in your lowest form. So now you're humbling yourself to Him alone. And likewise His actions towards you is upon the highest form of perfection. Allah's attributes, His qualities is upon the highest form of perfection. Be it His rahmah, be it His karam, whatever it is that you may be thinking of, from that which you've learned of His names and attributes, that He is the highest in those qualities. So likewise, you'll be turning to Him with that deep desire that you want Him and from Him alone. And so one way to implement this is to sort of think about specific names when you begin your salah. And for that entire salah, you'll be thinking about this name as you recite your qiyam, your surah Fatiha, and also in your ruku' and in your sujood. And over time, you'll find that it will become easier. Let us explain. Let's take the name of Allah, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. We'll use that again. And maybe you're going through a difficult situation. And you know that of the ways to earn the rahmah of Allah, you need to have certain actions. You need to be merciful towards others, for example. Rasulullah ﷺ said that for those who do not show rahmah to others, Allah does not show them rahmah. Irhamu ahl al-ard. Show mercy to the people on earth. Yarhamkum man fis sama. The one in the heavens will show mercy to you. Likewise, we need to be fulfilling our obligations in order to earn the rahmah of Allah. So maybe you're in a difficult situation because you know that of the rahmah, if the rahmah of Allah reaches you, then your problems will be removed from you. Of the other understanding that we have, and we went over 6 ways of how the rahmah of Allah affects you. If we recall our study, the first is that He gives you an understanding of the Qur'an. When you say, Ya Rahman, irhamni, have mercy upon me, you're asking Allah to grant you an understanding of the Qur'an. Why? Ar-Rahman allama al-Qur'an. The very first form of rahmah Allah mentions is that He taught you the Qur'an. He gave you knowledge of the Qur'an. So when you want an understanding of the Qur'an, you're saying, Iyyaka na'bud wa iyyaka nasta'een. Oh Allah, I'm asking you alone for help. Ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim. Guide us onto the straight path. The path, sirata al-mustaqim, is a path of action. There's many things that got to do with the sirat al-mustaqim. It's not just the straight path, something that's conceptual, or something that is just intellectual that you think about. It is the path of action, action that comes with knowledge. Sirat al-ladhina an'amta alayhim, the path of those whom you have bestowed your favor upon. In this context, whilst you're focusing on the names of Allah, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, you're now focusing on what form of ni'mah upon you? The rahmah of Allah. That you want to earn the rahmah of Allah. So you're asking Allah for tawfiq. Ihdina as-sirat al-mustaqim. The tawfiq to do every single thing that Allah wants you to do in order to achieve His rahmah. In order to achieve His rahmah, whatever Allah He says in the Qur'an, لَعَلَّكُمْ تُرْحَمُونَ. Do certain actions so that the mercy of Allah may overtake you. You're asking Allah for tawfiq in order to do that. Allahu Akbar. Likewise, you're saying, غَيْرِ الْمَغْضُوبِ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا الضَّالِّينَ. Not the path of those who have earned your anger. Rasulullah ﷺ said this refers to the Jews. وَلَا الضَّالِّينَ. Nor those who went far astray. Again, he said this refers to the Christians. And when you open the Qur'an, whenever Allah He speaks about the Jews and the Christians and the sort of things that they did, it's relevant up until this day. And you'll find that it's either one extreme or the other. It's either one extreme or the other. And so you're asking Allah not to make you of those or allow you to go down the path of those who have angered Him, like the Jews. They shut the doors of rahmah upon Himself. وَلَا الضَّالِّينَ. Not those who went far astray like the Christians, again shutting the door of rahmah upon themselves. Because you're focusing on rahmah. Likewise, you'll do it again in your ruku' and in your sujood. Maybe you'll think about another name. Let's think about the name of Allah, Al-Hayyul Qayyum. And again, it's such an important name that we need to be calling upon Allah with all the time and thinking about in our salah. But before we get into it, let us think about of the meanings that we went over, how to live by the name of Allah, Al-Qayyum, Al-Hayyul Qayyum, Al-Hayy, wa tawakkal ala al-Hayy alladhi la yamut. That you place your trust upon Allah alone, the one who does not die. The way to live by Al-Qayyum is Aqimus Salah, establish your salah. Establish the Qur'an and the Sunnah in your life. ذَلِكَ الدِّينُ الْقَيِّمُ وَفِيهَا كُتُبٌ قَيِّمَةٌ. Recall, having istiqamah. Istiqamah is 3 things. One is ikhlas. Because Rasulullah ﷺ said, believe in Allah, ثُمَّ اسْتَقِمْ. Have istiqamah upon that. Istiqamah is to be upright in your moral behavior, in everything that you do, not going near anything that is displeasing to Allah. So maybe you find that you are struggling with that. Maybe you are struggling with consistency in your salah. and you want to be able to be consistent in your salah. You want to be able to be upright upon the Qur'an and Sunnah. You want to be able to be upright and also establish your qiyam al-layl. So now you're saying, إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. You alone we worship. You're thinking, you're al-hayy, the perfection of life. You alone are worthy of worship. وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. And we're asking you, al-qayyum, for help. The only one who can sustain you. And you're feeling that when you're reciting it. You're the only one who can sustain me. You're the only one who can cause me to be upright. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم. So guide me to that path of uprightness, of istiqamah, so that I may be consistent with my salah. And I've actually heard reports, and this is just of reflections, that a person, he was struggling with his salah. He kept on oversleeping Fajr. And so for a few days, he kept on just, whenever he would wake up, he would feel sad. I missed Fajr. He was making it up. And so when he was reciting, إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ, he was thinking of the name of Allah, Al-Hayy Al-Qayyum. And he just kept on repeating it. And he kept on repeating it. And he kept on repeating it. And every single time he said, إِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. Ya Qayyum, you're the one who sustains me. I need you to help me with my salah. After a few days, he never ever overslept Fajr again. After that, he never ever overslept Fajr again. Because he understood who he was calling upon when he said, إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. That you're placing your trust upon Allah alone to help you fulfill all of your obligations, and you're asking Al-Qayyum to sustain you and your affairs in accordance with the Qur'an and the Sunnah. And that's the most important lesson when you call upon Al-Qayyum. When you say, أَصْلِحْ لِي شَأْنِي كُلَّ, from the dua in the Sunnah, you're asking Allah to rectify your affairs. What does it mean to rectify your affairs? It means to make sure that every single action of yours is in accordance with the teaching of the Qur'an and the Sunnah. Because that's istiqamah, how it all relates together. Maybe you're in need of rizq. You find that you don't have enough to pay the bills. And we went over today, Ghaniyyun Kareem. Think about these names when you're saying, إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ. You alone we worship. You're in your mind, you're understanding, because Allah, you are Al-Ghani, the all-rich. وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. You are Al-Kareem, the most generous. If you're not going to be generous to me, who is? If you're not going to give me, who is? Allahu Akbar. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم. Because you're realizing that you will not earn the karam of Allah unless you take certain actions. And so you're asking Allah for that tawfiq, to guide you to do that which you need to do, the mustaqim, in order to earn the karam of Allah. Likewise, you're thinking of Ar-Razzaq, you're thinking of so many names. Maybe you're feeling distant from Allah one day. You feel as though you haven't done enough. And we'll finish on this note. And think of the name of Allah, or perhaps you want a response from Allah. You've been asking Allah for such a long time, and you're wondering when that response is coming. So the names you want to think of when you're reciting إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ is Al-Qareeb Al-Mujib, the one who is the most close to you, even if you feel far from him, and the one who is always responsive to his slaves when they call upon him. And just continue reciting it. There's no rush. Maybe it's your Qiyam al-Layl, it's your Tahajjud. It's mentioned sometimes, Rasulullah ﷺ and even the Salaf, the Sahaba, they would just recite one ayah and continue reciting that one ayah the entire night because it was moving their hearts. In their Qiyam al-Layl, the entire night they would be reciting one ayah. Perhaps you just need to recite إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. You're thinking of ذَاتِهِ وَأَفْعَالِهِ. If you can master that, let's always learn to think about the that of Allah and the af'al of Allah, the essence and the actions of Allah. In His essence, He's the most great. He's the only one worthy of worship. He is Al-Hayy, He is Al-Ahad, Dhul-Jalali, Ar-Rahman. Likewise, af'al, His actions, how He treats you. Are you thinking of the names of Allah, As-Samad? You're thinking of Ar-Rahim, Al-Ikram, Dhul Jalali Wal Ikraam rather. And all the names of, how He affects you or how He treats you with those names. You want Allah to respond to you, just continue reciting إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. Oh Allah, I ask you for your aid, you alone. Because you're Al-Mujib, nobody else is Al-Mujib. Only you can be Al-Mujib, only you can give me what I need. Allahu Akbar. Your entire salah then has been transformed. Every single time you stand for your salah, your mind is not going anywhere else anymore, because you've tasted the sweetness of Asma al-Husna. You've tasted the sweetness of the names of Allah. And you've fallen in love with Allah because of the way He treats you and what descriptions has come from those names. And so now you always want to recall and remember the sweetness of those names. And when you realize Dhul Jalali Wal Ikraam, that nobody can treat you with that sense of karam. Nobody can see you as precious. Nobody can value you. Nobody can see beauty in you. Nobody can appreciate you. Nothing. Nobody can give you. But you want to be valued in the sight of Allah. You want to be precious to Allah. So when you're saying, Ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim, guide me to the straight path, what path are you thinking about at this point? Sirata alladhina an'amta alayhim, the path of those whom you have bestowed your favor upon, those who have become precious to you, O Allah. Make me of those who are honored in your sight, Ya Allah. You're connecting your understanding of the names of Allah in your Fatiha, the most important dua. And when you and I can start doing this, then we'll truly realize that Surah Fatiha is indeed what Allah He said. وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَاكَ سَبْعًا مَثَانِي وَقُرْآنٍ الْعَظِيمِ. We gave you the 7 oft-repeated ayat and the great Qur'an, the most important dua. The entirety of Surah Fatiha is a dua. May Allah grant us all a good understanding. May Allah enable us to implement this in our salah. Again, in order to do this also, we need to be asking Allah. In our du'as, ask Allah to help you think about His names as you are offering your salah. As you are offering your salah. And everything else will come after that. And with that being said, we will bring our study of Ismul A'azam to an end. And again, we'll say that now is all about action. Because you have now studied the understanding of the name, you know how to implement and live it in your lives. Now it all comes down to action. And it's all about asking Allah for ilman nafi'a, beneficial knowledge, knowledge that is put into action. We'll keep it over there. Allahumma ja'al khayra a'malina akhirah, wa khayra a'malina khawatimah, wa ja'al khayra ayyamana yawman alqaq. اللهم إنا نسألك الثبات في الأمر والعزيمة على الرشد ونسألك موجبات رحمتك وعزائم مغفرتك ونسألك شكر نعمتك وحسن عبادتك ونسألك قلبا سليما ولسانا صادقا ونسألك من خير ما تعلم ونعوذ بك من شر ما تعلم ونستغفرك لما تعلم إنك أنت علام الغيوب. اللهم زدنا ولا تنقصنا وأكرمنا ولا تهنا وأعطنا ولا تحرمنا وآرثنا ولا تؤثر علينا وارضنا وارض عنا. اللهم ارزقنا حبك وحب من ينفعنا حبه عندك. اللهم ما رزقتنا مما نحب فاجعله قوة لنا فيما تحب. اللهم وما زويت عنا مما نحب فاجعله فراغا لنا فيما تحب. اللهم حبب إلينا الإيمان وزينه في قلوبنا وكره إلينا الكفر والفسوق والعصيان واجعلنا من الراشدين. وصلى الله على نبينا محمد. أقول قولي هذا سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.